Just as a reminder, you can visit us at thepandapod.com. That's thepandapod.com to grab our RSS feed, listen directly, and share PandaPod with your family and friends. You can also reach us directly via email through podcast at thepandapod.com. Thanks for listening. Welcome everybody to the PandaPod. I'm your host today, Wiggy, and as per usual, we have the usual suspects, both Jeff
Hello.
and Ram.
Hey there.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about genetics, specifically human genetics, but maybe we'll get into some other crazy genetics while we're on the way.
I have some shit to say about worms.
Okay, yeah, we're down with worms.
We'll get into it.
Yeah, well, all right, we'll get into it. Um, so the kind of the first thing that I want to say is there was very recently a hack at 23andMe where hackers used um, credential stuffing to hack into 23andMe accounts. And just for people who don't know, credential stuffing is when your parents use the same username and password for multiple sites. One of those sites gets leaked, and then people just try those username and passwords on other websites.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I thought it was like a traditional Thanksgiving dish, except made out of like usernames and passwords.
That makes sense.
it sounds good, actually. I mean, think about all the really cool usernames out there, right? Like, I'm sure there's just some really cool. I mean, just imagine like on your video games or on Reddit the usernames, right? Like,
You got
I'm sure there's
XXX Warlock 969 in my cranberry sauce.
right. um, and so they were hacked, and there are currently somewhere in the realm of like 14 million users of 23andMe. Um, the leak contained real data, um, and so what they did was they posted in an online forum last week, offering to sell the names, locations, and ethnicities of what could be, millions of 23andMe users. And they called out Jewish people specifically, um, which is
Yeah, that's
terrible
crazy.
and crazy, um, especially in the current climate. I mean, it's bad in any climate, but even more so in the current climate. Um,
Now, I've heard a bit about this hack, and we really shouldn't even call it a hack because it really is not a hack.
no,
You know,
it's not a hack in a traditional sense of like somebody getting admin rights or bypassing a security like a security hole or something. It's
right?
Now, hang on a second.
And
How can you protect against credential stuffing?
use different usernames and passwords for every
But
website that
that's
you
on an
use.
individual user basis. So you're
right,
saying 23andMe couldn't protect from this at all. But what's strange is that they lost 23 million peoples. You said how many millions of people?
No, they have up to 14 million users total.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that it was all. I don't know the number of that they say that they actually hacked. I don't know if they listed that on the website or on the posting or not.
Right.
right.
Okay.
Um,
So maybe what this is then you're saying that somebody was effectively able to build like a scraper where if they got usernames and passwords, they tried them against 23andMe and could gather
Exactly. Yeah,
potentially a lot of data.
yeah,
But
yeah. And that's
nobody
what
knows exactly how
happened.
much they have.
No, because basically, first of all, there's no genetic information that has been hacked. the information they have is only what people have made publicly available, not publicly, but available to other 23andMe users.
Oh,
You
I
could think of
see.
it, so like people who are trying to share like family information,
Gotcha. Okay. So basically
and
they log in with some accounts. They get everything they possibly can from those accounts, and then they can use that to gather data on who knows how many users. But they're not, it's not genetic information because they're not seeing it from the admin side.
correct, yeah,
Yeah, they're saying names, locations, and ethnicities.
right. And
Which information you could get. Yeah, okay.
I've even heard that the only reason that it's advertised as Jewish information is because they just happened to hack some Jewish people's accounts, and that's who they were like connected to on like a friend level within 23andMe. Like,
Well, it's still
it,
pretty sickening of people to post it online that way.
oh sure, yeah, but I mean, scummy scammer is gonna scam,
Eh,
like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could also say like this person's probably I mean, not to make light of it, but they're effectively trying to market themselves in the best way they can, as sick as that is.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, and you can imagine the type of person who would buy the information, right? And it's pretty sick, right? Like that can't be used for something good,
And there's
right?
no guarantee somebody hasn't already bought it
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
because they
for
could sell
sure.
it multiple times.
Yep.
And I'm sure they
Yeah,
would
they
try to
definitely.
contact private buyers before posting it on a forum.
Yeah, yeah, that's also I didn't think about that, but yeah, that's a possibility as well. Maybe they reached out to um, people on dark web and tried to get as much money as they could first. So yeah, this is definitely something that's not good. Um, and well, going back to our episode on scams, this isn't necessarily a scam per se. However, this is one of those, you know, let's make a PSA announcement that, one, you should not be using the same username and password for multiple sites. Um, and you should probably be using some kind of password blocker. Um,
And two-factor authentication when
y-
available.
yeah, TFA one available, which should be available everywhere, in my opinion. I mean, I know it's device specific and not human specific, but it's definitely better than not having it.
I think in the
Um,
grand scheme of things, this particular, data leak is really far less sinister and far less usable than say like the Equifax hacks a few years ago or some of the other really big hacks. The only reason I think this one really got the attention it did was because of the 23andme name, and like people assume that, oh my goodness, my DNA's been leaked, but that's really not the case at all here. So
yeah, the only thing that I'd say to that is it does say names and locations, and if there's some people who like maybe hiding for their safety somewhere else or whatever, and they use the service, that information could be public now.
right,
Sure.
but I mean
Um,
that's true for, again, like I think it was Equifax that got hacked or whatever. I mean, that's a
yeah, same
way
thing.
huge database
Well,
of
and
Oh,
people,
sure.
name
and
and
people who didn't
location.
have control over whether or not they were on it as well. I mean, that
Yeah.
Equifax has everyone's info. 23andMe only has info of people who are rich enough to send off their DNA to find out their, genetic makeup.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it also I mean, name and location information is not publicly accessible, but it's widely privately accessible. So whoever wants to buy that information, if they have enough money, they can. Um, but I guess it's not associated with your ethnicity in that case. So that's kind of where it becomes um, dangerous potentially for someone to have that.
Yeah. So that being said, have either of you guys used like 23andMe at all, or one of the other uh several companies that do
Well,
DNA testing?
I've used the dog one, which rules. I like the dog DNA tests. I think they're fun.
What did you what was your experience with that?
I mean, Shadow did not like having it put in his mouth, but other than that, it was a whole lot of fun to find out what he was. Um, and I mean, it seems pretty accurate in retrospect. So I think that, I mean, obviously, like, there's not a whole lot of danger to a dog if that information got leaked or something like that, right?
For sure.
Or even to me, I have to enter some kind of owner information. I'm sure it has my name and location, but it has nothing to do with myself, right?
Right. Yeah. It'd be interesting to know how much like was it like how much of your dog was wolf?
Oh, actually, 0%. There is. I know somebody who had a wolf as part of their dog, and if you get that, it won't tell about the relatives of the dog because they don't want that information. Don't want you to be able to find other people who have wolf dogs.
Oh, because they don't want you to like selectively breed more wolfy dogs.
They don't want that, and they also don't want people to potentially use that information to like deny people renters and stuff like that.
Interesting.
So I guess that
See,
is one big way where dog information could hurt you if it got leaked.
right. See, now if we can get a hack on that, we can figure out who has wolf dogs, and then we can go provoke those dogs to attack us and sue.
That's an
I
ingenious
mean,
scam.
yeah, I mean, I guess that's one way to make some money, but you are putting yourself in harm in order to get,
I've been bit by
maybe
plenty of dogs in my day. It's okay.
maybe 10 grand. Like,
10 grand, sign me up. They can have a finger,
well, you're gonna run out of fingers eventually, and after the second one, people are gonna be like,
bro.
I
That's
think he's
100 grand.
poking. I think he's poking the bear. No, that's 20 grand.
No, that
After the
you
second
get
one,
10 times more money each time you successfully sue somebody for something. That's how it works. It's like
yeah,
Guitar Hero.
the lawyer gets better.
Yeah,
Lawyer
exactly.
XP.
You can hire a better lawyer with the money.
Well, I was thinking like the lawyer levels up, like in a video game. Like the more
Right.
cases he specializes in dog attacks.
I maxed out my tree on bird law.
Oh, okay. So neither of you guys have used any of the genetic testers.
I
No,
have
have you?
not.
You have not. Okay. I'm thinking about it.
Hmm.
Even with this, I already have a good idea of like historically where my family comes from, but lots of people have been proven wrong by their testing. And I think that that's interesting. Um, like I know what I've been told, and it seems pretty accurate. But I wonder if it's a little farther off and there's something else that, like, from where I come from that I just don't know about, right? Like maybe I'm 25% like Hawaiian or something, and I just don't know it, right? Like, like, like you never, or is it Maui? Is that what it's called?
I'm not 100% sure.
I don't
Not sure what you're
remember.
saying.
The people from Hawaii.
You're
Um,
25% Maui from Moana.
yeah,
Yeah.
Maui from
Surprise about
Moana.
what
Yeah,
Granny was doing.
that's a good song. That's a good one.
Now,
Um,
I am waiting until my parents die before I get any kind of genetic testing done because I don't want to find out that like my dad's not my real dad or something, you
or
know.
that your
I
dad's a
don't even
serial murderer.
right, I don't want that information. The only reason I want my genetic information is like for potential like CRISPR manipulation purposes. Like I don't care about my past.
So you're
I don't want
saying
to know
if
it.
if they knew for sure that they could, like, give you, say, webbed feet, you give over your information for that?
Yeah, for the tweaking purposes, yeah.
Right.
Mm,
Yeah, I think I probably would too. I mean, I'm not 100% sure I would do it, but I feel like if it was a two-step process and one was give away your information and like that now you can go browse our catalog of like all
Right,
the cool
yeah.
monkey arms you can get, you know, I feel like it would I'm not sure if I would do the second step or not. That would be a big decision, but I would at least do the first step.
Right,
I
because
do
like
it
I
just
want to go on the website and play around with the tool that shows you what you look like with like your third eye actually fully open, or you know, I want to go see all the different things I could do to myself.
Like a character creator for IRL.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'd only do it if I could get a better metabolism. Like
A
I'm
better
just
metabolism.
a
Sorry.
better metabolism. I'm just fat. Like I just want a better metabolism. It made me take away my issues with dairy and eggs, right? Like like just the things that inconvenience me.
Right. I mean, honestly, that's probably what would come first if the technology ever came around.
Yeah,
They would
like
probably use it to solve, I guess, major genetic diseases if possible first, because that those people would be desperate and ready to try anything. And then after that, they would use to solve all kinds of inconveniences, I'm sure. And then eventually we get fish arms.
Have you guys seen the movie Gattaca?
Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, me
I have
too.
not. I have not.
Oh, you'd really like it, Wiggy. But would you do that, Jacob? If you and Catherine were gonna have a kid and that was available, would you
The
want to do
Is
that?
Gattaca the one where you could see like their whole future using their DNA,
Um,
or was like because you got sorted using your DNA, right?
right.
Isn't
It
that
was
kind
like
of
a
how it works?
case system based on DNA.
Right, and you
Right.
would get different jobs depending on what your DNA was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I would say it's not. That would be a tough one. I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess ultimately, if you are using the best genes from both parents and you could guarantee that, like,
Mm-hmm.
but then who am I to say what are the best genes and what's not, right? I mean, who knows? I wouldn't be like, if I took all the parts about me that are smart and all the parts about Catherine that are smart, and I could somehow isolate those genes, like who knows that wouldn't be like the most fucked up kid in the world because like they can't focus on life's simple pleasures or something.
Right.
So I
We
feel like I
just
just wouldn't
for
mess with it.
yeah, for clarity, Gattaca is about two brothers, one of whom was like a natural birth and one of whom was a genetically engineered birth in a society where people who aren't genetically engineered are considered like a risk to society and a risk to the population, are put in like a
Ah,
lower caste.
well, I guess if I was in that society, then maybe I would make that choice. I definitely, who's to say I wouldn't, right? I feel like we all make that choice
Right.
every single day a little bit to some degree.
We also have to think of in that type of situation, and maybe this would be a different type of movie altogether in the same like in the same space. But if you take that idea, but only the rich are able to afford the to pay to have the genetic enhancements or the genetic choices,
Hmm.
like and make that the dystopian issue.
It's
Like
definitely implied in the movie that that's the case. Although for the specific main character, like he was just on the cusp of that new kind of technology where his parents were like, we don't know if this is really going to be a thing. Why don't we just have a natural birth, And then for his brother, when he was born, it was already had become like commonplace for people to do it, and like society was starting to shift around it, so they did it for him.
mm,
Right.
yeah.
I remember
Yeah, that's
seeing that
shitty.
movie and really thinking like that is coming next year. Like my
Yeah,
kids are going to be
yeah.
like that for sure, right?
Hmm. Well, and I don't think that's a like ridiculous thought either. I think that genetic manipulation through CRISPR, like it's already a possibility. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't start using that very soon.
So right now it's just expensive and also not a lot of people want to use it. Is that kind of the deal?
Right,
Well,
and
it's
I think
also
it's kind of
regulated.
it's an ethical gray area as well. I mean, because really, what you're getting into there is eugenics. You
Right.
know.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm getting into with like who's to say why would I choose what my kids should be like, I mean,
Hmm.
how can you know that certain things aren't tied? I mean, we know genes are tied together. So you wouldn't like it'd be so risky to be the first subjects in that, right? You almost have to see how somebody develops over 70 years.
Sure.
Yeah, but at the same time, that I think the logical flip side to that is we already don't have control over how people are genetically. I mean,
Sure.
I mean, you don't have any choice, and it's all kind of random, and it seems to work out. So I
Right.
think, I mean, well, in most cases, it doesn't work out in every case, but um, there is a bit of randomness to it, and you know, I don't know. I think they could figure it out. I don't think it's a good idea. Like personally, I don't think it's a good idea. Um,
Eugenics are such a tempting line of thought, I think, that everybody dips into at some point while they're like growing up and thinking about society. Like
Right.
I know I definitely
mhm.
thought about it as a kid. It was like, oh, eugenics makes sense. Why don't we just having like the smart people breed and stuff? It's like a an early kind of stupid monkey brain thought of how to like improve things. But then like you really start to think about it and you're like, oh wait, hold on a second. This is like deciding who gets to live and who doesn't, and making decisions that you don't fully understand or have like the full concept of. I don't know. It's a very like it's a tempting thought that like many, not many, but several societies have let grip them. Like
Well,
obviously like
Sparta.
Nazis and sure, yeah. I mean, you can go back that far too. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
and it's almost like ingrained in us. It almost is like a genetic memory, like this desire to like maintain bloodlines and things like that. Like it's a weird desire that we have.
Right. Well, I mean, the ability to decide to abandon a child is something that animals have when they're under extreme stress. So it's not like, I mean, that's deeply ingrained into humans, like the Sparta stuff,
Hmm.
and like ancient history of that kind of thing. I mean, it doesn't really seem like they're animals that intentionally cull. I mean, prove me wrong, but I mean, it feels like that would. I've never heard of such a thing. Animals that like decide to eliminate existing members of their species
well,
to.
well, cats, big cats have been known to do that. Um,
I guess I mean like collectively, right? Like obviously they fight over resources, they compete, but that's a different thing than like collectively getting together and making the decision to. Um, and I guess in a way, abandoning your infant is a sort of competition, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, so to think of it this way, so one version of that, in lions. Okay, so there's the from the hierarchy of a pride, right? So there's the head male in a pride, and then there's all the females, and then there's the lion's offspring, the male lion's offspring, right? Um, if say that male is like getting old or has some kind of injury that makes him not like great to like essentially lead that pride anymore, even though the females do all the work. Um, Oh, and another male lion outside of the pride happened to come by and say, "I want to take that over." And so what's going to happen is the two lions are going to fight. If that male lion that was leading the pride dies, the outsider that was the winner will kill all of his progeny.
Oh,
Um,
the old male's progeny
the
Right, but
dies.
old
Yeah.
male's
that's not really
progeny.
what we're talking about here, though. I mean,
Well,
that's
no,
not
no, I'm just no. It's just an example of something that is very similar.
Yeah. I mean,
However,
my line of thought was a little harebrained because I mean, there's not a lot of examples of animals doing things collectively in general, except for cooperating in pretty small groups, right? I
right.
mean,
oh
I think they
sure,
make
sure.
collective decisions somewhat for the group, but I mean, you don't hear about like bonobos deciding to genocide, uh, like part of their little tribe.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, that's not something that happens.
I guess tribes of monkeys will fight, right? I mean, I guess maybe the thing is just animals don't have a big enough collective to even consider, you know, what we would think about as human eugenics, right? Like for that to even be, I mean, I guess my comparison was like between that and abandoning children, which is an animal behavior, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. I mean, we really are the only species that focuses on how important um our offspring really are. Like a lot of other mammals in the animal kingdom will just as easily uh, kill, eat, or abandon their own children. Um,
Sure.
Especially if they're
so
born like disabled or disformed or something, you know.
yeah, yeah, they will immediately like bears and cats specifically, right? Like they will eat their kids. Um, I believe it's mountain lions um, in the U.S. I think because they have very small litters, like I think it's like two or three, um, and like if they don't find food, they'll eat their children, um, or
Sure.
um, bears. Like if their kids get attacked, the mom bear will like eat the child. Um, like that's just something that happens all the time. And like Jeff said, they're like if it's maimed in some way or born disfigured or whatever, they will just kill and eat them, which is crazy. Humans don't kill and eat their own babies.
Yeah,
You
I
don't
guess
speak for all humans.
I don't speak for all humans, but on a majority sense,
we got onto
humans
this
don't
tangent
do.
by talking about Sparta. So was there anything more to say there?
Well, I just wanted to say, well, I just brought up Sparta because that is an example of, if a child's born with some type of disfigurement or um, they don't quite stack up to the level that they're supposed to by a certain age, they
Sure.
used to throw the kids off a cliff,
Or leave them in
um,
the woods or whatever.
or
And I,
leave
I
them
don't
in the
think that
woods
was
or
unique to
whatever.
Sparta for the time.
I don't know if it was or not. I don't know if that was just part of like an overall Greek culture.
I would imagine that they were doing that until pretty damn recently. And I mean, I guess you still have instances of that, right? I mean, plenty of abandoned
Sure,
babies.
sure. Yeah, but I mean, they also wound up with a smaller like it was portrayed that they also had a smaller population, but that population was in better shape, right? Like that was their thing, right? Like one Spartan soldier could fight off 10 of anybody else's soldiers, right? Like that's what the movie 300 is based off of, right?
Sure.
Like that's the whole myth behind that. Now, whether or not all that's the case or not, I don't know. But um that was kind of the idea. That at least that we were taught. That's what we were taught in like school. Like
Sure.
so I
Yeah.
mean take that with a grain of salt, but
Well, I'm interested to think about like why that would be that people would focus on that so much. Like, what's the purpose of that myth in our culture? Because I mean,
I don't
it,
know.
it can't
But
be
maybe
true that abandoning babies like is ultimately the thing that makes you better warriors. I sincerely doubt that.
Well, I don't think it's the idea that because they abandoned babies, they were better warriors. I think it's more along the lines of the only people that were there were, stronger because they called the weak early, you know. Like
Right.
I think that's kind of two sides of the same coin, but
I mean, I think just realistically, most military victory is achieved through like a certain type of technology, if that's social or like physical technology that people have developed. And I mean, I guess you could argue that that is one, but I would imagine that at the time of Sparta, people were doing that kind of shit all the time, leaving their babies if they didn't want them, like if they thought, they were possessed by a demon or something.
Wild thought. Just all over the world, baby demons are born. There's just a epidemic of people leaving demon babies out in the forest. Like,
Well, I guess I mean that people will justify a reason for it, right? They'll
oh
decide that
sure,
that baby's demon possessed and just go leave it because it's crying too much. I mean, maybe I'm that's a little bit of hyperbole, but I feel like that I feel like it's overstated how much that had an effect on Sparta, and also, well, it's overstated how much it had an effect, and it's probably overstated how true it is too.
it's probably also overstated in how often um they did it, but I don't remember enough to go deeper down that
Sure.
rabbit hole. Like,
Yeah.
I don't remember what we were actually taught other than the highlights of it, right? So,
Is anybody else getting a weird sense of deja vu? Have we talked about this topic, like this particular thing, on this podcast before?
I don't
no,
think we were talking about Spartans before.
Not Spartans, but the idea of killing the weak for the strong. I don't know. It's really strange. I feel like in one of our first episodes we brought this up just really briefly.
not that I can remember. I
Okay.
don't I don't remember talking about that. Um,
Jamie pulled that clip up.
yeah, Jamie, can you look that up? Um,
Yeah,
but
Jamie is Chat GPT that can and all of our voices synthesized, so we can just make
Hmm.
whatever clip we wanted. We
Perfect.
can podcast into the past too.
I can't wait until we can release a podcast that we don't actually record. I feel like we're getting close enough on the number of hours of our voices just talking here that we can load into an AI.
I would
well,
say
that's
there's
gonna be
probably
fun.
plenty. It's just, does Chat GPT produce a better or worse episode than we do? We should find out.
Let's be honest, probably better, but because it's worse.
Yeah, that's fair.
like like it's so bad that everybody's just like, okay, this is hilariously great. Um, that's one of my favorite dualities, by the way. Um, is things that are terrible, but I love them so much because they're so bad.
Oh yeah, so bad that it's
Oh,
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
like movies, music, um, it just I love it so much.
And
I
like
don't know
Coaling the
what
Weak, so bad that it's good.
yeah. I idolize. I dream
Eugenics.
about.
So
I
bad
dream.
it's good.
That's like one of those commercials from like Better Off Ted.
Oh
Like,
yeah. I fucking love that show.
speaking of which, people, if you haven't gone and watched Better Off Ted, which was a TV show from what early 2000s, I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was canceled after I think just one season. But it was amazing, and they had this corporation that they were a part of, and the corporation would make like corporate commercials, and those commercials would be like based off off of one idea, just kind of like what Jeff said, like eugenics, so bad it's good, like,
Yeah.
and
Viridian Technologies.
Viridian Technologies.
Go
But
ahead and
yeah,
watch
go watch
all
that.
media that has Ted in it. Father Ted, that one movie with the teddy bear. Um,
Just Ted, yeah.
yeah, just Ted. Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it? Definitely go watch some TED Talks. Those are good.
Yeah, go watch a TED Talk on genetic memory, which is actually something I did. I watched a TEDx talk.
On genetic memory?
Yeah, on some experiments with worms.
Interesting. Well, this is a good time to bring up the worms then. What did you learn?
Hold on real quick. I want to add. Was that by a guy named Oded Rashavi?
Um, Let me find out. Jamie, pull up my browser history. um, it sure was. Did you watch the same one?
No, but I was looking up some information on memories, right? On what's that called? on like genetic memory. And he's been listed as like an award-winning member of the scientific community, who is actively studying this. He was also recently on Andrew Huberman's podcast, um, Dr. Andrew Huberman, if you know who he is. Um, and yeah, that's just what I found out. The rest is on you, Rab.
Yeah. So in the TED Talk, he details like the history of. I mean, it's only 13 minutes. We could definitely put it in the show description. You should go watch it. And he details the history of people doing experiments to prove that like animals had genetic memory, mostly unsuccessful. Um, and he goes through a study that he did with a certain type of worm. And what's interesting about this worm is that they have really quick, like, generations. They're like generation every 3 days or something like that. And they also only have like 300 brain cells. Um, so they are very like driven by RNA. Um, and he goes through a experiment that he did that basically proved that the RNA was helping worms. Like he starves half the population, and it helped their descendants. The ones that were starved, they developed a mutation that um, helped them better regulate nutrition. That's at least what he said in this talk.
Interesting.
Yeah, they also recently, it wasn't him, I don't think, but they also recently did a study, and it seems that if there's any species that is most likely to currently possess the ability to have genetic memories passed down from generation to generation, it's actually mice.
Hmm.
Um, the results of that were obviously mixed. However, um, it did show more promise than any other um, creature that they had performed the test on up until that point.
Are you
The
Um,
sure that's
RNA
not
stuff.
confirmation bias because they do all the tests on mice?
maybe I don't know. Yeah,
Studies say that mice are often used in experiments.
yeah. I'd actually be interested to. The problem is the generation is so long, but if there's actually a creature like in this world that I think could maybe pull that off, I think it might be elephants. Um, just because of brain size. Like just purely based on brain size. I think that maybe elephants, because they tend to have memories that last for so long. Um, and we also have really long memories, but we also forget a lot of shit. Um, our brains are rewritten all the time. Like our memories rewritten all the time when we sleep and stuff.
Sure.
So,
And I think it's useful to define some terminology then because I mean, you're saying genetic memory like literally holding the memory still in your mind of of something that a parent remembered,
mhm.
like holding it in your conscious mind, you're saying.
No, just something I think the biggest example of this would be, and I kind of think it's true, and I'll start off by saying I think it's kind of true. I think it is something that definitely exists, like being able to pass down some sort of information or memory from one generation to the next generation. I don't think it's a conscious thing, but I do think that it's possible. And the reason why I say that, and the one that sticks out to me the most, is humanity's fear of the dark. So back when we were like go all the way back to, even when we had created fire, so we had like campfires at night and things like that. Even during that time, and it's still today, we're afraid of the dark because we used to get hunted by shit at night.
Sure.
like big cats and wolves and things like that. And I think that that's why we're afraid of the dark, because we also don't have that like adapted night vision like a lot like some other creatures have. Like we adapt a little bit, but it's really hard to see at night in the dark in a forest. Like when you don't even have moonlight, right? Like you can't see shit. And we use our sight just as much as our sound to protect ourselves. And that's why I think we're so afraid of the dark, is because just even from the very beginning of time, we've always had a problem protecting ourselves at night.
But if you're talking about humanity's fear of the dark, I mean, I don't know how far back it would be, but it's at least, it's got to be tens of millions of years before we
Yeah,
got an ancestor that had, um, night sight, right? I mean, so,
yeah.
but I guess what I'm trying to say is, on the scale of tens of millions of years, why is that genetic memory and not just a gene?
Well, it wouldn't just be a gene.
Why is
I
that?
mean, because the if it was a gene, the fix for we would have developed a some sort of night vision fix to that by now. If it was just a gene, our gene would have changed over time to adapt to the problem, right? Like we
But
would
why
have
wouldn't
developed a
genetic
night sight
memory do
like
that too?
cats
I mean,
or
isn't the purpose of all of this to help animals survive? So, like, what does it have? Like, in my mind, I would think that genetic memory would be the most interesting if it was like provable that, your great grandparents who you never knew had influence over your life through what they experienced, right? Like, and like on that order of time scale. Like, because
oh,
genes are proven not to work like that, right? They take much longer timescales than that.
right. Well, Jeff mentioned in the our last room podcast about how he thinks that one of the reasons why we think about Rome so much is just because we may have had ancestors that lived in Rome.
Sure.
Hmm.
So it's not something that you know I I think that's possible too. Um, I
And
don't
Rome is
necessarily
not on a
think
time scale where we would need to have genetic memories. Or sorry, Rome's not on a time scale where we would have developed genetic mutations. Like, individuals could develop genetic mutations, obviously, but like as a population, 2,000 years is not enough time to develop
sure.
genes. So if we have any tie to Rome, it's definitely epigenetic, right?
Right. I was gonna bring that up. Yeah, it seems like we're really talking more about epigenetic memory than genetic memory at this point.
Well, the
You know
term
that
epigenetic just means anything outside of genes, right?
right? It would be like environmental factors that leave like chemical marks on your genes that can influence the way your genes are passed on. From generation to generation.
Sure. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, that's what we're talking about with genetic memory, or are we talking about something different?
I'm talking specifically about uh a memory or a feeling or um fear or something like that. That's say we had like so say we had ancestors that were around snakes all the time,
Sure.
and and most of the people in your family are afraid of snakes. Like maybe one ancestor got fucking bit and died, or your ancestors got bit and died by snakes all the fucking time, or something, right? Like, and now you have a fear of snakes. Like,
So that's more of like instincts than
it's
memory,
close, yeah. Well,
right?
it's close to instincts, but to me that comes off as memory because yes, it's an instinct, but why would you have that instinct if you don't have something? Because so say I'm afraid I'm not afraid of snakes, but I'm afraid of spiders,
Sure.
right? So let's just take this as an example. I'm afraid of spiders. I don't have a memory of being attacked by like a swarm of spiders or a spider that makes me afraid of spiders.
Sure.
But I'm afraid of spiders.
Okay, so you're basically saying that it's anything where you um like believe something one way or another
And you don't know
without
why.
and you don't have a reason for it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I
Right.
guess what I in my mind that those fears are explained by actual genetics, like literally just DNA. Like, I mean, if you think about how long, like, you take the snake example. I mean, mammals probably have been eaten by snakes since they crawled up on land.
Hmm.
And if you think about how many millions and millions and millions of years that they kept that fear of snakes, and then really it's only within the last, you know, 100 years and only in certain places that it becomes an unreasonable fear, right? So
Hmm.
like it would almost be like crazier if people didn't have fears of snakes.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And lots of our fears are like that. It's all things that would have been um something dangerous to us. Like those fears are something that we have that are supposed to help us stay alive, right? Like you have a fear of snake. Well, you have a fear of snakes for a good reason. You should stay away from snakes because they'll fucking kill you. Like, right? So I mean, there are ones that are a little more crazy. Like, but I don't mean crazy as in like the people that have them are crazy, but they don't really fall along the same line. I mean, people are afraid of all kinds of things. Like Jeff's afraid of clowns, right? Like I can't imagine a situation in which there were just roaming gangs of clowns murdering people.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not
But
trying to say all fears are explained by genes. I'm saying the deep-seated ones
yeah, the
that
deep seated ones.
seem to defy explanation is only because they defy explanation like in a pretty short time frame. I mean, even fear of the dark, like if you count from the day we had fire, like, and then if you count backwards from there to the day the dark was danger, I mean, it's such a much longer time scale.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we have flashlights, we have all the stuff to keep the dark away right now, but I'm still afraid of the dark.
Sure.
Like, even though I have this stuff, which I think is what you're saying, but like I mean, I'd still be afraid of the dark if I was out in some forest somewhere, even if I had a flashlight or a lantern or even like a damn torch, right? Like, I mean, I'd rather have the torch to be perfectly honest, because at least you might keep something away from you. But like, there's a reason for all that stuff, and I think that's the root. To me, I feel like that's the root of genetic memory for me is these things that us as a species that we experience over a really long period of time, and it becomes second nature to us to protect our species, right? um stay away from wolves, stay away from bears, stay away from snakes and spiders and all this stuff that's just dangerous. um I mean, we're touted as the one thing on the planet that is like, we're at the top of the food chain, quote unquote. But there's lots of shit out there that'll kill us. The only difference is they don't have thumbs, so they can't shoot guns, right? Like that's really the difference. Um, which is why,
Which is why we need
like
snakes with
Planet of the
guns.
Apes, right? We need snakes with guns, and why like Planet of the Apes is so scary, right? Um, they've been something that's stronger than us, faster than us, and still being able to, use our technology and communicate the way that we do and things like that. Like the, it's a weird fear, and I don't think in any way that that's like a genetic fear, but um, that is something that that makes that's why that's scary, right? It's a new predator to us. And if that was the case, I think we'd just be, after a couple thousand years, I think people would just be born afraid of monkeys. Like, I honestly think that'd be the case.
Well, I think it takes a little longer than a couple thousand years.
Well, sure. I mean, I'm not an expert,
So I guess
but
what I've been trying to really argue here is just terminology. I mean I think what the opinions you're expressing about like fears coming from our essence, like our DNA, I don't think that's really a controversial one. Not that you were claiming it was. I guess what I'm trying to say is like there's a different thing called genetic memory and like epigenetics, and there's a lot of controversial opinions in that field, like whether or not things in recent history or as far back as the Romans could affect our day-to-day lives. Like those are the questions that I feel like I associate with like genetic memory.
like something like your grandpa having an experience and you being able to remember that experience.
Yeah, I mean, not literally able to remember it, but like one of the things that the guy brought up in his TED talk is that one thing that got people thinking about it was the way that the Nazis treated people, and the effects that that had on their descendants. Um,
Hmm.
and he specifically talked about a study that was done on people who were like in Danish concentration camps, um, and I mean, it was like their descendants, not the studies on them, of course.
Sure,
But their descendants had like problems with diabetes and things like that. And I mean, obviously, that doesn't necessarily have to be explained by something in the DNA or even in the essence of the person. I mean, that can literally be explained by like deficiencies in critical minerals, as you're starved,
sure.
right? But that time scale of like if it could be proven um, that something done to a worm affects its grandchildren, I think that's a pretty interesting, um, uh, you know, I think that's a pretty interesting conclusion to come to.
Right. And epigenetic memory in that case would really make a lot of sense because the idea that the people in the camps, were being starved and were lacking nutrients, and because of that, their DNA didn't have the building blocks it needed to build the same DNA to then pass down to their children afterwards. That makes sense as far as like epigenetic memory is concerned because, you know, if you are malnourished and your DNA doesn't have the components it needs to, create the correct, ingredients for the next person in line, then yeah, of course there's going to be something wrong with the next person. It's the same thing that we see in like, Chernobyl and the like the wild packs of dogs that are running around in Chernobyl right now. They are different than generations before it because epigenetically they've been affected by the radiation,
Right.
which affected their offspring. So things like that, I don't think there's it's still being like heavily researched and understood, but I don't think it's very controversial to say that obviously there are things that can happen to a person who can affect their descendants.
Well, I don't. Well, in this case, I guess the thing that I would argue in the case of starvation. So to take that example of, say, I'm starved, and I have a child. My genetics are spread when I'm having a child, and like I would argue if my child then was born with type 1 diabetes, you could argue that there was genetic change that took place to offset to solve the problem, right? So I don't necessarily think that that's epigenetic, because I mean, once again, I'm not a fucking expert, but it would make more sense that the offspring would have a fix to that problem than be born with any different than the parent was.
But I mean that is epigenetics. What you described is epigenetics.
Well, you said epigenetic was external factor. Starvation isn't an external factor.
How is it? How is that not an external factor?
I mean, because I could choose to starve myself and then go have a kid.
But it's external from the perspective of DNA. It's not. It
Right.
has nothing to do with the transmission of DNA. I mean, it would. What would be? I mean, and I think this is proven to some degree, like with radioactive and stuff like that. When DNA is damaged, that can be it can be transmitted damaged. Um, so I mean, it can be explained by that. Um,
But wouldn't it
how
just be evolutionary change?
well, I mean, it's. I guess it becomes evolutionary change once it starts to affect a whole species. I would say. I don't think like one person can't evolve. If they mutate,
Well,
it doesn't mean anything until that passes down to a lot of
sure, but if
descendants.
it, but like you were saying, if it was a whole, like in a Danish concentration camp, say they were all Danish, and most of the children that came out of that have diabetes, and all of those parents were starved, like that would lead me towards an evolutionary change, like than like a one-off type thing or epigenetic. But that's just my logic. Like it doesn't make sense to me any other way as far as I understand. I mean, I'm not that
I
deep
think
into it,
I
but
think that's just a lack of understanding of like what evolution really is. You
I mean,
know,
it
and
could
that's
it could
okay.
be it could be, but just based on my understanding, that's what makes the most sense to me.
Well,
Would be
one
that
thing,
because you would adapt to be able to solve the problem through your genes, right? Like that's
yeah.
the entire idea. So that's what makes sense to me. Unless I've just been fed a whole pack of bullshit, or I'm not just deep enough in the knowledge to really understand. But
Maybe, but I mean, one thing that's true, right, is that our DNA has a lot of like potentially unused code, like things people don't know what they're for, and potentially disabled portions as well. I mean, and when I say disabled, I mean like currently off. Obviously, genes are on and off to some degree, right? I mean,
sure,
they can be on spectrums as well, but they, but there's a lot of stuff in there that's like almost like group commented out, you know. So it's not out of the question that we like circumstances can modify our DNA, which can affect our children, and I feel like that's kind of how that I feel like that's where I think the um, science has the most interesting questions to answer.
yeah, I'd say so too. And if that's the case, like how I would be interested in the differences in percentages of those that are turned on versus turned off when you compare them to other mammals on the planet, right? Like humans versus um species of monkey versus you know a wolf
Well, I think
or
that's I mean maybe
like
not on versus off, but you can kind of get that because they can count the number of chromosomes.
yeah,
Various things
that's what
have.
I'm saying. I'd be interested to know whether or not we have more that's off. Um
I
or if that's
guess yeah, it just depends on what's needed for what. I mean, we still don't fully know what's needed for what. You know, so I mean, we have some genetic mapping done, but it's not like the full human genome sequence has been mapped because otherwise we would be in CRISPR where you could just literally get a fish arm if you wanted to.
all right, AI. Time to answer these important questions. I'm really interested in it now.
Well, AI
Uh,
can give me a fish arm. It just takes a little bit of work and stable diffusion.
Right. True. You
right.
just gotta
True.
gotta have the right prompt.
Yeah, but I think so. I think that it's really interesting the memory side of genes. Like it's like we said before, we don't know whether or not it's true. I kind of believe it's true to a degree. Um, but I think it is one of those questions that needs to be answered. However, I think you're right. I think we do need to kind of figure out the rest of the puzzle pieces. Um, and maybe we do eventually find out that we were just our DNA was manipulated by aliens, and we have the ability to turn on and turn off and adapt to new genes in shorter periods of time. Um, via mutations that we were designed that way by aliens, right? That'd be pretty cool. Maybe we're the experiment, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you never know. We could meet aliens that have a totally different cellular structure, or ones that I guess it would be more surprising if they had the same type.
Yeah, it would be more surprising if they had the same type, because why would they, recreate something that they already knew? I mean, unless they already know that they're the best, and the way they got to be the best was through their genes, right? Um, but even then, to see if there's a possibility of a branch that's different, um, yeah, that's super interesting to think about.
And Wiggy, when you talk about genetic memory, it really sounds more like you're talking about like the Carl Jung idea of like collective unconsciousness, you know, which definitely factors into the genetic memory conversation. You know, the idea that um, inherited wisdom and intuition from the past is like baked into us.
Well, I agree to that to 1%, but the part that I don't agree with is the whole a part of that was racial, if I'm remembering correctly. Of if his thoughts were like even racism could possibly be a genetic memory of some sort, and I think that's hogwash. But
Wait, wait, wait.
uh,
Do you mean racism, like fearing other people, could be a genetic memory? Because I think that
yeah,
that could fit into the same as like fear of the dark or anything else, right?
Sure.
I mean, yeah, it could be, but I don't think, but like you were saying, I don't think there's been a long enough time of where we were that different, because like if we go back to, I mean, how long ago was it before the land bridge happened, right?
Well, it's
Before we
not
had the
that long ago that there were other species of like hominids running around. Um,
Sure,
and
sure,
and it
yeah,
would be natural for people to want to compete potentially by like kill on sight other types of hominids. Um,
yeah, but I mean, we bred with
sure,
Neanderthals.
that too. Um, so it's I mean there's different strategies for dealing with them, but I I mean I think you could even say that potentially like something that looks like you that but slightly different could go back to you know any type of mammal or even fish. Like if somebody's coming in and competing with your economic niche or your I guess your calorie gathering niche, right? But and they look a lot like you and they're doing the same things. Like I could see that being ancient. Not to say that it's right for people to feel that way about other people
Well,
and do things to
tribalism,
harm
sure.
them, but I feel like there's no reason it couldn't go back to
Yep,
people's.
I mean, now that you're saying that, yeah, maybe, because that makes me think of tribalism. Like there were just roaming different groups of tribes, and they were all competing for the same resources sometimes when you were in the same area, and there was constantly fights between those tribes, and
Sure.
like there are now. Well, like we can't get over tribalism. Like it's the one thing that's super pervasive in America right now. Um, it's always me versus you. It's never, and the minority is the let's come together, or even maybe the majority is let's come together, but the people who are more focused on tribalism just stop that from being a thing. Maybe that's just the next. Maybe that is a memory or type of like genetic memory that we need to find a way to get over. You know, but it shows in our love of sports. You root for your favorite team and you want yours to win. It's your color. It doesn't matter what, you know, it doesn't matter how well they do. You just want the other guys to lose, right? And it's the same thing with our politics right now. It's red versus blue, it's us versus them, and it doesn't really matter um, who they are. It's just, my team has to win. Um, And so yeah, that definitely could be a piece of the puzzle too. I can see that now.
I
I
feel
can see
like the
that now.
conclusion I'm coming to is that the reason animals don't have all these problems is just because they don't get together in huge groups. Not to say it's not a good thing that humanity tried or a good thing to go for, but I feel like maybe snakes need to have like a fucking they need to learn Robert's rules and then have to throw like a 400 person uh party conference or something so that they can see what it's like, and I'm sure that they'll devolve into factions and slit each other's throats.
It's just the scene in that Indiana Jones movie in the pit with all the snakes and they're just slithering all over each other. This is a giant snake orgy.
Snake Caucus 2024.
Well, let's make a T-shirt. Snake Caucus 2024. We'll have just balls of snakes.
I'd vote for the snake caucus.
I mean, they probably better make better decisions than we do,
Yeah, a
for
ball
sure.
python just like pressing yes or no depending on like which side of the bed it woke up on would probably do a better job than most sitting Congress people.
Sure, 100%.
At least it would vote for the right thing 50% of the time.
Is that how that works?
I mean, I guess it would depend on the options being offered. Probably most things that they vote on are not like good. You know what I mean? So like neither option is very good. So it would have to there would have to be a good option offered for it to actually do anything good, I
I mean,
suppose.
we could make a coin flip machine. I mean, it couldn't be that terribly hard, right? I mean, we made Magic 8 Ball. I'm sure
Yeah.
that'd be just as accurate.
What we need is Twitch gets elected.
We need what we need for government is and everybody plays.
Yeah,
Like how
exactly.
they do with Pokemon on Twitch, yeah. Like everybody just gets on and votes, and that's the thing that happens.
We should at least get one Twitch congressperson, like where it's fully vote online about what they're going to do each day. Like, we deserve one of those. It wouldn't mess things up that much.
Yeah, but just like Pokemon, it wouldn't get much done. Although it'd probably get more done than any other fucking congressman or senator.
Exactly. We'd prove that
So
it works. We proved direct democracy works, and now you see why we can't have this.
yeah, we're sad. We're sad, and it makes me sad. uh, All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us today, guys. Thanks for joining us for this episode and our talk about genetics. And we hope you guys join us next time and hope you guys have a great week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Snake Caucus 2024.